Welcome back to Razmafsar TV. I'm having back Beat here today. Hi, Beat, first of all.
How are you?
Thank you very much. Well, hope you too. We are going to
Yeah.
talk about, excuse me, we are going to talk about today some very important artifacts from Nasiruddin Shah Qajar collection, royal collection of him, which have been
Mm.
collected since Safavid period, and then they were kept there during Shah time, before revolution, in um, the university, military university for officers collection. Then they were, I think, after the revolution, this Nasiruddin Shah Qajar, which were kept there, collection of arms and armor, were divided into three museums: one of the Military Museum of Tehran, Military Museum of Bandar Anzali, and Military Museum of Shiraz. And the Persian arms and armor in these three, you can see them in my book, Arms and Armor from Iran. But today we are going to show some of these artifacts from Military Museum of Tehran in Sadabad complex. Actually, we wanted to talk about quivers, but then I figured there are some beautiful bows. We can also show them a bit, talk
Always
about
interesting.
them. Yes,
Mhm.
and then we go to the miniatures and show quivers, bow cases, and things like that. Okay, let me just start okay, let me see. So we go from the beginning. If hold on, okay. These are rare pictures because, first of all, I mean, I took them out, took pictures. You can see them and measured them. You can see them in my book, Arms and Armor from Iran. Here, even you see that they were exhibited the first time you can see them, because military museums of Iran do not allow to take pictures for average goers or videos, so you can see them. So this is a Safavid quiver. We are going to talk about them one by one. So this is this Safavid quiver, as you can see that here. And I remember, Pete, when you saw it first, you just said, it looks exactly like in the miniatures. Do you remember what you said to me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Late Safavid miniatures show quivers exactly like this. And even into the Zand and Afshar periods, you see quivers very much like this. Later quivers often have cross straps between the bosses on the leading edge of the quiver, where behind which the straps are attached.
Yes.
But I mean, you can see from this one, it was originally decorated with lots of little studs all over the
Yes.
surface to make a
Yeah.
pattern.
They're
But
missing. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, it doesn't detract. It's a really beautiful shape.
Yes.
This is I I would consider this to be a hunting quiver.
Yeah.
It's meant to carry maybe 12 to 18 arrows. Um, the arrows in the display are point upwards because they want to show off the different points, not because they
Yes.
were
That's it. Yes.
um, the other thing, from the photographs in your book, it's quite clear that the trailing edge of the quiver, that's the one towards the back, is reinforced with wood, as is the base.
Yes.
But the leading edge of the quiver, where the bosses are,
Yeah.
is in fact just the two pieces of leather folded together and sewn.
Yes. Yes.
Later
True.
quivers may have had a wooden reinforcement on that leading edge as well. But see, this is an early version of this quiver,
Yeah.
and it shows a lot of things that later quivers don't have anymore, or they've evolved into a different shape. And when I say evolved, I mean people making them have changed the design because they thought it would work better in a different way. But this has got a kind of classic look to it. You will notice that the top part of the quiver, there's the top opening, and then down to the first boss that a strap is attached to, it's
Yeah.
open all the way down, which is to make
Yeah.
it quicker to take the arrow out. Even back in the 16th century, there are Turkish quivers. There's one in Vienna that have that feature. It's a design for active shooting rather than just it's not there just to look pretty. It's got a purpose.
Okay. And the interesting thing that the leather strap is also there. You see that?
Yeah, the belt and the straps that attach it.
Yeah.
Notice how the strap just passes through a slot in the belt.
Yeah.
It's not over the belt as you would. Modern quiver makers often design their quivers so that you can attach them to the belt that's holding up your pants or your trousers.
Yes, that's right.
And this is lovely, but real quivers in from the 19th century back usually had their own belt. It was designed as part of the quiver. There wasn't a separation between the belt and the quiver, because I mean, you see in old Chinese novels talk about quivers that have hooks on them and you just hook them onto your belt.
Yes.
That's the closest that people got to the modern style of quiver.
Yes. Very nice. Very nice. And as you said, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 studs on this side remain. Sadly, the rest of them, because during the passage of time, they're missing, right? Of course, many of them are missing. Right?
Look, if they're gold studs or something like that, they don't fall if someone takes them off.
Yeah.
And let me say this: I'm not talking about the current curators. I'm talking about something 100 years ago or 200
yeah,
years
of course.
ago.
Of course. No,
I mean, this happens all over the world. But
yes.
those studs, like, there's a wooden frame down the trailing edge of the quiver where you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 surviving studs. Those were acting like nails to hold the leather of the quiver against that wooden frame. The frame is covered in leather too,
Yes.
but the same thing would have happened along the base of the quiver.
Yeah.
But the studs in the middle, the ones that are the 3 that are free floating, that was a design. That was to give an effect. Whereas the other studs, they're part of the structure.
Part of the structure. That's right. Absolutely. Let us then move on, please, Beat.
Yep.
Okay. So we are going to bow on the top is from the Zand period. I mean, it has also a documentation and also the floral design of the Zand period, which looks very flowery and very vibrant, is there. And you can see it's catalog 425 in book Arms from Iran. You can see it. Isn't it beautiful? Look at this.
Absolutely superb.
See, look at this decoration.
Yeah, I mean, the decoration on this is a work of art. And I can't remember. In the book, I looked at it very closely. I can't remember whether the painting is directly on the horn on the belly or is it on a very fine layer of birch bark or leather or something like that. I can't remember because it's been a couple of years.
And the bead, when I had it in my hand, this bow is so solid. I mean, all of them really, you can tell these are heavy bows. Bead really heavy.
Oh,
they're not meant for just games, right? Really heavy bows. Really.
I mean, we don't get that breadth of bow weights surviving historically often. In China, it's more often, you see it more often, and you can pick up a bow and you'll say, oh, this is really lightweight, and it's for practice or for recreational archery. And then you pick another bow and you say, oh, this is very hefty. This is really strong. The Persian bows traditionally were considered to be very heavy bows.
Yes.
And the famous joke bow that was sent to one of the Ottoman sultans, which had 2 limbs and hooks and all kinds of stuff, by one of the Safavid Shahs. The joke was, our bows are so powerful, you guys can't even put the string on them. Now, of course, somebody did eventually. Delhi Hassan did. But the point was that it was quite reasonable among the Turks and the Persians to think that Persian bows were very strong. And we know Ottoman bows were very strong. So we're not talking about people who didn't understand what strong bows were. Both sides in this particular discussion knew what a heavy bow was. And we're talking maybe 110, 120, 130, 140, all the way up. I mean, exceptionally strong bows up around 200 pounds. But let's be honest, nobody shot those often. I mean, there are people that could and there are people that did, but for a war bow, anything between 110 and 160, it's going to do a lot of damage.
And then there is a pellet bow. You can see it down there, which is Qajar period. Uh, uh,
Gulel, something like that.
Bede, explain what pellet bows were used for, please.
Oh, this is wonderful. And they're still, well, they were until a few dozen years ago, still used in Afghanistan and northern Pakistan.
Oh,
And they were uh, used from China to I think the Maghrib, I think North Africa.
mm,
So what they are is they're a bow set up with a little pouch on the bowstring for
yeah,
shooting small stones, pellets, lead balls, whatever. And they were used in hunting birds. And there was a skill. So you pulled it back with a pinch grip, and it could be quite heavy. I mean, I've met people who can draw 60-pound bows with a pinch grip. I couldn't, but with the shape of a pellet bow, it's actually easier because the carrier of the stone folds around, so you've got something to grip onto. So you draw back, you shoot, you flick your wrist as you shoot because otherwise the pellet hits the belly of the bow or your hand. It's a real
exactly.
skill. I've seen photographs from Afghanistan of little kids shooting these.
Have you shot one?
No, I'm too scared. I've only held one and it was an antique and they wouldn't let me shoot it anyway. I could have made one because the difference between a pellet bow and a regular bow is more in the string than anything else.
But
But
Pete, if you get hit in the face by one, this should hurt as well as a human being,
oh yeah,
correct?
I mean it's like a modern slingshot,
Exactly.
except it's the bow.
Yeah, it's like a
And
modern extinction.
people that write about them, I'm talking about the old manuscripts we've translated and other manuscripts, all say they're very accurate.
Oh,
But it's not aiming accurate, it's like throwing a stone accurate.
it's-
So
it's-
you learn where the pellet is going to go. And if you practice, you can be very, very accurate. There are paintings from 1100 about in the I think the Northern Song Dynasty from China of
mm.
people. This is gentlemen out with a bow like that, except made of laminated bamboo, and a little pouch on their belt full of pellets on horseback going hunting birds with a pellet bow. The particular painting involved got all kinds of misidentifications in various books about ancient Chinese warfare. It's a pellet bow. There's a little disc in the middle of the bowstring showing where the pellet fits. And these ones, often they had a double string that joined into loops to fit over the ends of the bow. And in the middle of the double string was sewn a little leather pouch. And you put the pellet in the pouch and you squeezed it together so the two string parts came in. And then you pulled it back and then it goes.
Pete, did you need to have a different type of bow, or could you use just change the string for a pellet bow?
Generally, they were made with a specific bow for them.
Exactly.
And I think
Do
it
you know
was
why I
because
mentioned that? Because
Mhm.
when I handled these bows in my hand, please take a look at this one. This
Yeah,
bow, okay, I couldn't look into it, but had a completely different feel
yeah.
compared to other bows. Yes.
The reason is pellets are much lighter than arrows. So
Yeah.
if you used a full strength, normally constructed bow and put a pellet bowstring on it, it possibly could break because the pellet doesn't absorb enough energy. If you had a really big pellet that weighed the same as an arrow, it wouldn't matter. But generally
Pete,
speaking,
look at
that was
this. Look at this. You see that it has a very strange shape compared to the other bow on top. Look at this. You see that? It looks like a short, long bow.
look,
Not a long bow, but you know what I mean.
yeah, it could be a self bow and
Yeah.
just covered in sinew and painted, which would technically not be a self bow, or it could be a laminated wood bow,
Good bow. Yeah.
layers of wood glued together with maybe bamboo or something like that. Because you don't, again, you want something that's really robust, that's not going to break, because of the very light thing. See, shooting a pellet bow is like dry firing a regular bow. Not quite as bad, but it could potentially cause problems for the bow. So if you've got the bow on top, probably costs the same as 3 months' income for a middle-class person. The bow on bottom, despite the beautiful decoration, probably costs the same as 1 month's. So therefore, if it broke, you were very sad, but you were nowhere near as sad as you would be if the top one broke, because the top one was much
Of
better.
course. Going
Yeah.
back to the top one, please.
Yeah.
Could you explain what these parts are for the resting the string? Could you just explain to our viewers again?
Okay. It has separate string rests. When you make a string in the traditional manner, and we've called them in the translations, they came out as 3 loop strings.
Yes.
So the end loop of the string is a physically separate part from the core of the bowstring, and it's tied in with a special knot. And that knot rests on that string bridge.
Yeah.
And it sometimes they make them out of leather, and they absorb some of the energy of the bow right at the end, possibly to reduce the sound. Mostly in the Middle East, they're made out of bone or ivory.
Yeah.
And the reason is they catch the string. So the tips of the bow they go up like that and then narrow in and then are very narrow to the end. There's a possibility the string will slip off the edge and the bow will turn inside out. I've had that happen. It's very scary. But these things prevent that from happening. They're usually kind of triangular, a bit upside down, heart shaped a bit. Now, on modern bows, when they duplicate them, they put a groove down the middle, because modern bowstrings, they have the loop just past that part. But on traditional bowstrings, the loop was either on the string rest or slightly below it. I think Adam Karpowitz points out that this increases the stability of the limbs. But the thing about that is, if it wears out, you can take it off. Some modern bow makers build them into the limb, and that means if you want to change the strings to a different type of string, like a traditional string as opposed to a just simple endless loop string, you're pretty much in a difficult situation. I'm not saying that the modern ones are wrong.
Yes.
They're the proper way to respond to how modern bowstrings are made. So it's a very small change, and it doesn't really change how they are. But
another thing I wanted to ask and point out, Pete, so we can talk about them. Please take a look at the bow handle here and compare it to the bow handle of the pellet bow.
Okay. Well,
you see the difference?
Yeah, the major difference is, of course, if you're looking from the belly of the bow to the back of the bow, is the fact that you've got a curve like this.
Yeah.
And the center part of the curve fits in your hand.
Yeah.
The top part of the curve is to provide a narrower place for the arrow to go past.
Yeah.
The bottom bow, because you're shooting a pellet. Now, I'm trying to get in shot here. When you do that, the string is going up there. So you don't need a narrow place for the pellet to go past, because you're providing that by your wrist motion. Now, if you did that with a bow that you're shooting arrows out of, you get all kinds of problems with the arrow. But the other thing about that swelling in the middle is it gives you a very good way of always putting your hand on the grip exactly the same way each time.
Yeah.
And we know with modern bows, you take a modern recurve bow, it's got a shaped grip, it's got a shelf above the grip. Now, all these things are designed to make sure that when you pick the bow up, you always hold it exactly the same way and the arrow is exactly the same position. That's what this is for too, except it's a little bit simpler. My general feeling is that the middle finger sits on the highest part of the ridge on the back of the bow, and the index finger is above and the other two are below. But on some bows, because the grip is smaller, I have a feeling that maybe that highest point sits between those two fingers. It's you've got to pick the bow up and feel it to know where it's supposed to go.
Yeah. So, okay, now we go here, and they say that these ones, there are different arrows, and the museum says range from Safavid to early Qajar periods. I mean, they're, you know, that the Afsharid and Zan period were very short periods anyhow.
Yeah,
Because, you know, in contrast to Sasanian period, Achaemenid period, Parthian, or Safavid or
yeah,
Qajar, Afshar and Zan periods are really short periods. One has to say that. But
yeah.
so they look at these arrows, please. Beautiful, huh?
Okay. Now I can't quite see the topmost arrow because it's covered by
Oh, so just wait, bear with me. Bear with me. I'm going to do change it somehow. Bear with me, you're right, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Just a second, please, Pete.
yeah.
Because I didn't take into consideration that I can see them, but you cannot see them. You're right. I did not
Yeah.
take this into consideration. Yes, exactly. Okay. Just a second, please. I'm going now back to where we are and going to, just a second, now share. So if you cannot see anytime, let me know, please. Then here, can you see that now?
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay.
So I would say the top three arrows
Mm-hmm.
are hunting arrows.
Mm-hmm.
The next three arrows are whatever you shoot them at, they're going to pierce quite deeply, but they'll still cut like a broadhead. Sometimes people think these small broadheads are for small animals,
Mm-hmm.
but it's quite unlikely. Particularly in America, they've done studies of stone arrowheads, and it turns out the very small ones are probably to increase the efficiency of penetration on large animals rather than the other way around. The next three arrows are the one at the top is possibly an armor-piercing arrow. The next two are for kikat, the shooting down from horseback at a hard target on the ground at full gallop. This is sometimes called amaji, tiri amaji,
Yeah.
because the target was an earth mound, so it's a butt arrow. Those long steel points have a tang that's almost twice as long inside the arrow. These are really robust arrows. They were sometimes used in warfare at very close range against armored opponents. So if you have, say, 120, 130-pound bow, notice they're also a bit shorter.
Yeah.
You get to bang, you shoot them. At very close range, these will puncture quite a lot of things. So sometimes you see in quivers a special little hole in the face of the quiver with an arrow in it with a highly decorated part where the feathers would be, but sometimes no feathers at all, sometimes with feathers. Like the middle one of those three, you can see the bases of the feathers. The lower one maybe didn't have any feathers. It's hard to say. You'd have to look at the arrow itself and look for traces. But sometimes they were used at such close range that fletching wasn't important. The bottom three are for
Do you read? Do you know the bottom two in the books, in the archery manuals we worked on? They called them tire mashqi, that they are not sharp. They're, you know, remember that these. Okay, go ahead, please. Yes.
So one of the things a friend of mine told me once, we were talking when we were translating one of the manuals that talked about shooting through glass.
Yeah.
This friend of mine said that as a young man with a gun, they used to try and shoot through bottles. And they found that if you had a bullet that had a flat tip, it would make a round hole through the bottle. But if it was a regular bullet-shaped tip, the glass would shatter.
Oh,
There was
wow,
another
that's
trick.
interesting.
And these could be simple blunts, like they could be for shooting birds and trees, or small animals on the ground where you don't want the arrow to penetrate. or they could be shooting for trick shots, where you're shooting into glass bottles or something like that. The one on the top is a really elaborate target arrow. Now, whether it was meant for regular target shooting or some kind of kabak shooting, when you're shooting at a very high angle. But arrows had levels of decoration and fittings, like sometimes they had gold paint, things like that. So an arrow might be a very high standard, and it might be used in demonstrations before the king. Like
They're very beautiful arrows, very beautiful. And just one thing, explain why they prefer to use reed. Not always, but mostly.
Okay, I think it's, see, we look at reed and we think bamboo, but generally speaking, the reed arrows that I've examined have actually been proper reed, not Arundodanax or one of the bamboo relatives, but Phragmites. But the thing is, there's only some places in the world reed grows really hard that's really good for making arrows. And there are places in Iraq, places in Iran, places in northwest India where the reed, with a bit of heat treatment, produces a really strong arrow shaft. And the thing is, that arrow shaft may only be 6 millimeters in diameter, but it can be as stiff as a wooden shaft that was, 8, 10 millimeters in diameter. But it weighs less. So I've got arrows that are unbelievably thin, but when I tested them on a spine tester, which tested deflection, they behaved like they were solid wood arrows. So if you have access to the material, reed is a really good material for arrow shafts. Going back to the ancient Egyptians, they used reed. There are parts of arrows were found in Israel from the period of the revolt against the Romans. They went one step further. Normally, when you put an arrowhead into a reed, because the reed is hollow, the arrowhead has a tail, it fits into the hollow. You wrap the reed with sinew, or you use a piece of hardwood and put the arrowhead into that and wrap it with sinew. What some of these arrows had was the back of the arrowheads was sharp, so when you shot it, it would penetrate, but then the arrow shaft would split, and it could not be, if it hit a hard object, it would be useless, it couldn't be shot back. If it hit a person, it could potentially cause a really nasty wound. These were little trilobite tanged arrowheads. So when you look at these, the Amaji style in the second group of 3 from the bottom, you can see sometimes decorative rings around the reed.
Let me show it for our viewers. This one.
Yep, that's the one. Yep. So those rings are ferrules, and they can be made of different metals for decorative effect, but their purpose is to stop the arrow from splitting when this is shot out of a powerful bow at quite close range. Normally, that's not the kind of thing you would do, but there was a whole set of exercises to show off how fast your reflexes were, how strong a bow you could shoot. I mean, there's a very famous painting, I think it's from the Shirazi area in the late Ilkhanid period, of people shooting at shields. Like they put a shield on the ground and gallop past and try to shoot an arrow through it. So I mean, they're beautifully made, but they're not for decorative purposes. They're meant to be functional. And those type of arrowheads, some of the ones I have are so solid. And often, I mean, those ones have got like a smooth conical point. The point, the base of the point is wider than the whole rest of the arrowhead and wider than the shaft. So when they hit something like a piece of armor, they punch a hole that is bigger than the rest of the arrow shaft, so it keeps going in.
Peter, you remember when we went through those Persian manuals, we found also many descriptions of different types of arrowheads. That was beautiful, right? They had all different names. Oh, yeah.
The one thing you can say about archers throughout history is they love variation in arrowheads.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's right.
it's true in Iran and it's true in Turkey. And there's a very famous painting of two saints from I think the monastery of St. Catherine in Sinai.
Yeah.
And this is from about the 8th, 9th, 10th century, and they've got closed quivers, so you can see all the arrowheads sticking up in the quiver. And
Yeah.
there's about 5 or 6 different types.
That's right.
Because I think it's a problem we archers have. We just love variety in arrowheads, and we're always trying to find a new arrowhead that works better.
Yeah. Pete, just before we move on, take a look at this arrowhead. Do you see the I'm pointing at? What is it
Yeah.
made of? Can you explain this as well?
If I remember, it's made of cylinders with a hole through the middle of ivory and other materials
Exactly.
built up, and then the tang of the arrowhead fits through the middle of them and holds everything together.
Yes, that's right.
It's really a show-off piece. It would be used in some kind of target archery competition. It princes, shahs, emirs, mirzas, people like this would have these arrows to
Yes.
show how important they are. But the thing is, of course, it only the demonstration of wealth only works if you can shoot well enough.
Yeah.
If you
Yes.
shoot badly and you have a beautifully expensive arrow, it's the same thing as if you have a really expensive car and you drive it into a wall. People do not respect you. But if you drive really well and you've got an expensive car, then people
Yes.
respect you. Same with these arrows.
And now look at these ones, please. These are also very interesting. And these are attributed to early Qajar period, Fatali Shah, these arrows. What do you know about these arrows?
These arrows, these are basic broadheads.
Yeah.
Their design is mainly for hunting, but you've got to remember by the time of Fatali Shah Qajar, not many people were wearing armor.
No.
So all of a sudden, arrows that 100 years before would never be used in warfare because they would hit armor and they'd be up. But if you shot this against a person in a kind of military uniform of the 19th century,
of course,
they go straight through.
It's straight through.
There was this kind of imbalance between the development of weapons. When guns came in, they basically eliminated armor except for hand-to-hand fighting. And therefore, you didn't want to go for full plate armor or something like that. But it also meant that bows that formerly wouldn't kill people suddenly can, because sharp broadheads cut through material, and tests have been done, very careful tests. They cut through material. They definitely cut through flesh.
Yes,
I mean, I don't know how many bow hunters there are in the USA, but I think they could all stand up and say, yep, definitely go through flesh.
Yeah,
sometimes through bone. See, the one thing that the difference between a broadhead like these and modern broadheads is these are much solider. If these hit bone, they shatter the bone. They don't bend or something like that. Well, unless they're not hardened, they will shatter the bone. And so hunting, and bear in mind, in Iran, you're hunting wild boar, which currently are a real problem because nobody has a use for them. You're hunting in Gilan province, you're hunting tigers.
Yes.
In the south west, you're hunting lions. And that's just the predator
And lots
animals.
of boars in Iran. Yes, the
Yeah,
boars.
well, I've seen documentaries showing how they're getting completely out of control because nobody eats them.
Yes.
And nobody really has any use for their products. So they get into the national parks. They have no predators because tigers and lions are pretty rare. Leopards still exist. Leopards are another thing. If you have a choice between hunting a lion or a leopard, hunt a lion leopards are much more cunning, apparently. This is according to the old text when they talk about what's really dangerous. I think it's Usama ibn Munqidh in Syria points out that lions are very brave and whatever, but leopards are very cunning.
Yes. If you go in many areas in Iran, and I was, I was 3 times, 4 times also for military museum in Bandar Anzali, and then in that documentary they show hundreds of boars were walking in together, and I looked at this and what they have. I didn't even know that boars. There's so many of them in one spot because they don't have predators and they don't. Yeah, of course, that's the reason.
Yeah,
Many
yeah.
of them.
I mean, we have a problem with feral pigs in Australia because pigs escape from farms,
Yeah.
and then they, over the generations, they breed into tougher and tougher pigs. Apparently, around Armidale, which is a town up in the Blue Mountains,
Yeah.
the pigs are huge because domestically bred pigs get really big, much bigger than wild boars, but
Yes.
generally they're not able to survive in the wild. But over the generations, pigs with those genes have. And people hunt them with guns, people hunt them with bows, mad people hunt them with knives. And but they're very dangerous because pigs are smart. Um, my cousin used to take hunting parties out hunting pigs with guns, and he said that he never saw them charge people. You often read about them charging people. He said, but what happens is if the hunter gets between a mother, a sow, and her babies, the piglets, she's rushing to the piglets to protect them. And if you're in the way, she just runs straight over the top of you. And that's very unpleasant. Boars are very aggressive, but he said the most dangerous thing was the female pigs protecting their young. So I can sympathize with what the problem they're having in Iran because we have this problem here. Unlike the Iranian boars who are native, our pigs were all brought out here.
Yeah. So we go to the next one, please. Let me see why it's not working. Okay. So I'm going to show pictures again, separate them, these items. Okay.
This is a
Sand
good picture.
quiver.
Yeah.
What do you think about this one? It looks different to the Safavid one, right?
Well, this is the inside face of the quiver, the part that's
Yes.
against your body.
Yes.
And it's important to look at this. Now, the late Safavid one had 2 bosses.
Yes.
One only has 1. But if you see below that boss, that little heart-shaped bit, that would have held a ring and took another strap. So even though it only has 1 obvious boss, it still had the 2-strap process. Now, the ring up towards the back edge,
this one?
that took another strap. That was the balance strap to stop the quiver from rocking backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
So this strap at the bottom in the middle,
yeah,
I've seen it on Turkish quivers too in, I think, either, I'm trying to think now, I think it's in Vienna. Personally, I think it was either for wrapping the quiver and the bow case up in a bundle for carrying, or for your servant to carry a quiver and present it to you. Because if you put a strap through that, the quiver, you could do it. Maybe it's a better way of carrying the quiver when you're on foot, but it doesn't. As a person that uses quivers all the time, it doesn't look particularly practical. The other ones, on the other hand, I can see exactly what they mean. The other thing you'll notice with this, at least half the quiver is open on the leading edge to get the arrow. Even though this supports the arrows almost up to the feathers, half of that quiver is open, so you can just start pulling and flip the arrow out rather quickly.
Just to make it sure that our subscribers understand, you mean this side, correct?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
This side. Oh, sorry. This side.
I was going to say that the other thing that's interesting about that is it's the same construction as that other quiver. So there's a wooden rod down the trailing edge, which is the right side. There's a crescent-shaped base piece, or like a circular base piece.
Yeah.
These are held on by little nails or little rivets.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then on the leading edge of the quiver, which is the left side here, it's all stitched because there's no reinforcement there. And this
Yes.
seems to be a thing that was typical of Persian quivers of, I'm guessing, the 18th century onwards, because this is what you see. And if you think about paintings like the wall paintings, late Safavid wall paintings in Isfahan, you see quivers that look a bit like this.
Yeah.
Except they're covered in jewels and gold and whatever. Maybe the reason we're seeing the inside face of this quiver is the other side was originally covered in jewels and gold, and somebody levered it off and sold it. Again, not the people that run the museums, but the people that originally owned it.
Yeah, I mean, I need to say just one thing, that the military museums in Iran, or museums in Iran generally, are very well guarded, and no one can even do anything there. Nothing.
See, this is one of the problems, because some of these items went from royal collections into the museums, and some of them went from private collections into the museums. And the ones that came through private hands, the person that bought them may have bought them after somebody stripped all the jewels off. And then they thought, oh, this is important, I'll give it to a museum. It's not, there's no reflection on the museums themselves, because as soon as they get hold of something, they do their best to preserve it.
Yes.
And
the one
so
on the bottom is dated 914 Hijra, 1508 or 1509 Gregorian year.
So this is well, that's amazing, because that's so well preserved.
Well preserved. This is actually one of the hallmarks of the pride of the museum, because this comes directly from the royal collection. And on top of that, this one, not on top of that, I mean, here, really on top. This is also another one. This is also 1104 Hijra, 1692, right? So this one, right?
And see the characteristics. I mean, the bottommost one, there are paintings showing bows with that kind of decoration. Not necessarily that wonderful spiral decoration on the bending limbs, but that separation into gusha decoration, limb decoration, kabza decoration, limb decoration. So this is a kind of bow that you can identify from paintings.
Beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah, the one above with the massive twist. Now that massive twist is because composite bows can do that. You give them a few hundred years and they're not regularly strung and fixed.
Yes, it's massive twist. Yeah,
massive twist. But the decoration is the same style.
Yeah.
So the gusha is decorated. The tip is fairly plain. You notice the string bridge you can see on one limb. It's very much similar to the other bow we had earlier.
This one, excuse me, this one, right?
Yeah.
Very beautiful.
Very nice bow.
And there is a Qajar period, a bow. If you take it, it's not a palette bow. If you look at it, you think it's one, but it's not. And you see, again, the handle on this is not the same as the other palette bow. Do you remember that?
Yeah. This could be a practice bow.
Yeah.
In Arabic kubade, but in Turkish kapaze. These bows were used at very short range to practice your form.
Yes, and in Persian, as you know, we found out kabbade, the same name they use in Warzish Pahlavani. Yes.
Because, I mean, we're talking about, even though the bows are different from culture to culture, there's a deep cultural root going back to the 9th century under the Abbasids, with Persian archery masters, Arab archery masters, everybody in Baghdad getting together and working out what they think is the best way to shoot.
Yes. Beautiful bows, aren't they?
Oh, they're wonderful.
Wonderful, really wonderful. Okay. You don't see them again. Just a second, please. I need to adjust them for you. Okay, hold on, please. Exit here. Okay, I'm going to make it for you so You can take a look at them. I should have thought about it before. Okay, let me see. Now I'm going to share it again. Excuse me. Okay, so now we are here. Okay, can you see them, Beat?
The arrows,
Yes.
these are war arrows, Tiri Takesh.
Yes.
They've got armor-piercing points.
Yeah.
My experience with arrows with this type of point is that they're all very solidly built. Really, even old ones, and most of mine are from the north of India. So,
Yeah.
but they're the
Yeah.
same construction, the same design.
Yes.
They're really straight, even after hundreds of years.
Yes.
You see the coloration. You've got a bone or ivory knock. I'm not saying which it is because without a close look with a magnifying glass, it's hard to tell. Then that's inserted into the reed. Then the reed is wrapped in sinew.
They are
Then
ivory, Beat. They are walrus ivory or ivory. They are.
okay, well, yeah. So these are very valuable arrows to
Yes.
start off with.
Yes.
Then the what's called in English the shaftman. That's the part of the arrow that the feathers are attached to and whatnot. That's
This
wrapped with
was.
very fine sinew and then painted, and then the feathers are glued onto that. There was a belief that the glues they were using would not stick to the plain reed, so that they did this for practical purpose. But of course, when you start to paint it, you can put designs in, you can have little flowers, you can have all kinds of stuff. Then bare reed. Now the next colored part below the arrowhead
Yeah.
is more
This
wrapping
was.
in sinew to stop the arrowhead splitting the reed. And then it's painted to protect the sinew. Sometimes, I mean, in some countries, they would wrap it in very fine cherry bark or other things to waterproof it. But if you put sinew, paint, and then lacquer, whether shellac or other kinds of lacquer,
Beat. Why don't
yeah,
modern arrow makers use reed to make
because,
arrows?
well, first of all, most of the reed that they have access to is much too weak. So in Australia, if I go out and pluck some reed and dry it and everything, you could crush it with your finger. If you're in Gujarat or you're in Iraq or certain parts of Fars and things like that, the reeds are much stronger. I went to a botanist with some reed arrows and some bamboo arrows and said, what are these? And he said, well, without cross-sectioning, I can't say for sure, but the reed arrows look like Phragmites. The bamboo arrows are definitely bamboo. Reed arrows are generally lighter than bamboo arrows. You can have bamboo arrows that are heavier than wooden arrows, depending on the bamboo. Reed arrows are very stiff if it's the right type
But
of
why,
reed.
I know that southern part of Iran, there are lots of reed, this type of reed you say. Why don't they import from Iran, India, Iraq? They can import.
Well, the thing is that archery is fairly conservative. It's really hard even, I mean, if it wasn't for Chinese exporters, then bamboo arrows would be very rare in Western Europe and
Yeah,
America.
you're right.
Still are very rare. I mean, there's people like Yarp Copperdry who's growing his own bamboo in Georgia and making Japanese style arrows out of it, and selling the bamboo after it's been properly treated and everything. But bamboo, generally speaking, if you just pick a piece up, and this is exactly the same for reed, if you just cut a piece off and dry it out, it won't necessarily be a good arrow material. You've got to heat treat it, which hardens it and increases its stiffness and also somewhat shrinks it a little bit. You've got to be careful when you heat treat it not to have the segments explode. So with reed, the septa that divide the segments are very thin. You could get a long piece of iron, like a piece of piano wire, and just ram it up through the middle, and that would completely clear it out. With bamboo, you need a drill. So what they generally do is they puncture near the node to let so a green bamboo, when you're drying it, or a green reed, is full of water. And when you heat it, that water comes out, and it comes out as steam. And if there's nowhere for it to go, it can rupture the tube that the reed or the bamboo is. So there's techniques in making these. A lot of the Indo-Persian arrows I've seen made of reed, you can see they have been heat treated because it's very dark. This isn't paint. This is from the heat changes. These ones are lighter. That doesn't mean they haven't been heat treated. Now, I have seen bamboo arrows that don't require heat treatment. Bhutanese archers make them, but the bamboo grows high up in the mountains, and it's much tougher than regular bamboo.
Yeah.
So whereas yeah, they're very good, but I wouldn't. These ones, I would say, the manufacturing process, the reed itself may have been from a particular area. There might have been like, oh, reed from this area, this is the reed to use. Reed is very light. If you cut lots of it and shipped it to places, a donkey could carry enough reed for several thousand arrows.
Yes.
So when you think as a trading item, it would be light. It's not massively valuable, but it's quite simple to set up a trade in it. There's evidence that India exported high quality reed for arrows. Now, to give you an idea, you will see technical, like historical things discussing weapons, talking about the Mongols using bamboo in Mongolia. And there are, in fact, bamboo arrows from tombs in Mongolia, but there's no bamboo growing in Mongolia, or there wasn't back in the good old days. And so it was all imported.
Yeah.
So if you were a rich Mongol, you could import bamboo and make arrows out of it. If you were a poor Mongol, you made your arrows out of trees that were growing in some of the valleys. And in Iran, they did make wooden arrows. The ones that have survived have been largely reed, but in the manuals that we've read, they definitely knew about different woods for arrows.
Yes.
There's a lot of discussion of the pros and cons of poplar, for instance, which sometimes in English is called aspen. And the same arguments about the suitability of that for an arrow wood you can find in Elizabethan texts like Roger Ascham's Toxophilus. The very same things. And of course, the advantage of poplar was you could grow heaps of it and you could make lots and lots of arrows. Now, they weren't perfect, but when you're going to war and you're going to be shooting several 100,000 arrows in a campaign, cost and ease of production become quite important.
Yes. If you keep shooting
Sorry?
arrows like that with ivory nocks, and so soon you're going to be bankrupt.
See, in Japan, if you got shot by an arrow like that, they would say, somebody important shot me. Oh, I'm dying, but at least I've been shot by somebody important. The Japanese had this thing. If you were hit by a regular arrow in a battle, you were hit by a stray arrow, even if the person was aiming at you. But if you were hit by a decorated arrow, then somebody killed you on purpose. So maybe the same thing happened in Iran and in northern India and places. It's very hard to say until to be honest, until you find that manuscript that says this is the arrow you shoot a general with.
Beautiful arrowheads. Really, I love this type of arrowheads.
These are kind of classic armor-piercing arrowheads.
Right.
Super strong.
Yes.
I think from a blacksmith's point of view, they're relatively easy to produce.
Yes.
And with a little bit of grinding in that, you could make a set of arrows that shot like a set of target arrows.
Yeah.
And maybe in battle, you're not that worried about that. But let's be honest, if they're so regular in production and they perform so consistently, then everybody's going to like them.
We talked about them, but this is interesting. This bow is interesting.
Oh, yes.
This is Qajar period, but we have earlier examples of them as well. But this is, let me just make it smaller for you, please. Excuse me, Pete. So you can take a look at that. So this is a really beautiful one.
Yeah,
you see that?
A lot of people will look at that and see the figural painting on it and say how beautiful the painting is. as an archer, I look at that and think, wow, look how they've packed the power into that bow.
Yeah.
The-
What
the-
is?
the- yeah, I'm going to say something that may not make sense unless you've seen a lot of modern bows. But modern bows, when they try and replicate uh, bows of this period, tend to make the handle come up and then step out like that to the limb. Whereas if you notice, this is a very smooth transition from the narrowest part of the handle where the arrow goes past
Yeah.
to the broadest part of the limb. Because when you're shooting a bow like this, it's much easier to aim if the limb has a pretty much straight line. Whereas if it steps out and then goes up, you've got this transition point. This one doesn't. Turkish bows don't. Crab bows don't. This is a characteristic of bows designed for, I'm going to say, easy aiming. This probably isn't what they were thinking. Now, the other thing is, notice how narrow the grip is compared to the limbs.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. Obviously, the narrower the grip is, the less the arrow is deflected. So
Yes.
therefore, you can use much stiffer arrows, which means generally heavier and stronger arrows, and they still go straight. The wide limbs, though, have a functional reason, which is wide, flatter limbs do not take as much set. That is to say, when you string the bow and unstring it, if the limbs are thick and narrow, they have a tendency of staying somewhat in the shape of the strung bow, whereas limbs like this, over a period of a couple of hours, will go back to the original reflex of the bow. So they're much more functional for long-term use in like war situations. Now, I'm saying this, I observed this, but the person who first spoke about it seriously was Adam Karpowitz in his book on Ottoman bow making. The difference is that a Persian bow is more likely to show a strong reflex today, more so than a Turkish bow, which tends to be more opened out.
Yes.
Except for flight bows. And this is the theory, which in my case is a partly interpretation of what Adam said, is that this kind of bow was meant for campaigning. Even though it's beautiful and it's got paintings of horsemen and everything on it, it was meant for long-term use in a campaign, and it was meant to retain as much of its power as possible.
Yeah.
That underneath the painting would be lacquer, shellac type based lacquer. Underneath that would be a layer of birch bark. Underneath that would be strips of horn. Instead of one big piece of horn, it would be strips of horn laid next to each other.
Yes.
Bow makers I've spoken to said this makes a more flexible bow, but of course, when you make it really strong, that flexibility means it's just a little bit easier to draw. It doesn't mean that it's weak. It means, it's just a bit easier to draw. A bow that's narrower and thicker probably shoots an arrow faster.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about the difference, and these bows were fast, a Turkish bow shooting, 300 feet per second, and a Persian bow shooting 280 feet per second, it's not a big enough difference in battle to make anyone worry too much. And if you're shooting, Persians generally used a slightly longer draw. Perhaps they had more taller archers who had a longer draw. I'm just looking at the arrows. So the actual force of the arrow when it lands, and by lands I mean hits a person, is going to be very, very similar, except the bow is going to be usable and performing well for a longer period of time.
Yes.
In combat situations. When you take it home, you hang it up on a rack in a heated room or something, and it recovers its reflex and it goes back to normal. But over a period, see, a bow would be strung, maybe it wasn't unstrung for a week. And under those circumstances, this type of bow retains a lot more power than other bows. It's the same when people make wooden bows and you make a self bow and you make it with thin, flat bending sections,
Mm.
that bow takes less of a set than, say, an English longbow style, which is deep D-shaped sections. And this is the same thing for composite bows.
So this, I don't know why this slide comes up again and again, wants to remind us that these are very good arrows.
Oh, they're lovely arrows.
So we go now to the miniatures. These miniatures you can see in Persian archery and swordsmanship, all of them. So I just put them here to look at the equipment. And yeah, look at this bead. Look at this. You see that?
Yeah.
And also this here.
So
Okay, tell us.
the quiver on the left is good because it shows you the straps.
Yes.
Somebody has done something to it.
Yeah.
So originally it had gold paint on it, and then that's been wiped out somehow. It may have had something written on it that offended the person who owned the book at one stage. If you look at the quiver of the man behind him, you could see that it originally would have had a quite complex decoration on it. In this case, a blue background with black decoration. The man on the right, who doesn't look very well, he looks like he's been shot in the throat by an arrow.
I think he's shot here in his forehead or eyes.
Oh yeah, yeah. You can see.
And
yeah,
he's
you
trying.
can see
He banned it. He's trying to pull
Yeah.
it out and he's banned. Do you see that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. His bow case is an unusual style, but you see it in Persian miniatures. It has two suspension straps like a quiver.
Yeah.
I've made one like that. It's really useful. Most bow cases that survive, as in museums and that, have a single suspension point, and their balance is very critical because when you get on a horse with a bow case and quiver, your quiver's on your right side, your bow case is on your left side, but your legs are going apart because the horse is there. Your legs aren't going straight like they would be when you're standing up. So when your legs go apart, it means the tips of the arrows come across your back like that, and the tip of the bow comes across your back. So your bow case and quiver must be set up so that those two things don't hit each other. And if you look there, it's not common in Persian miniatures, but there are quite a few where you see a back view of somebody with a bow case and quiver, and you can see that one is always higher than the other, so they don't interfere with each other. And this strapping system with the two straps, which, I mean, this looks like a holy person shooting, because he's riding a donkey or a mule, probably a mule, and very uncommonly he's shown with his thumb ring, and he's got the flames coming up around his head to show how important and holy he is. Now,
this is from Khavaran Name, and these are about the heroic deeds of Hazrat Ali. So that's this.
Yes, Ali. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Because he was famous as an archer.
Yes.
And appeared to many of the archer guilds and things like that.
Yes.
But you see, well, several things. Notice how straight his shoulders are.
Yes.
I mean, this is a painting. The artist may have done that because he liked the look of it, but as archers, we know this was a thing that was highly regarded. Secondly, he has, well, to be honest, the thumb ring is painted on backwards. The lip of the thumb ring is at the back of his thumb.
It is.
The reason that is because when you're wearing a thumb ring and you're not shooting, you often turn it around so you can use your hand normally.
Yes.
So somebody has literally seen someone wearing a thumb ring like that, but not when they were shooting. But he's doing this. His index finger is released, but the three other fingers are still closed. His thumb is, I mean, you know, he's released there and it's gone up to there. So his thumb is pointing up in the air. But this is a real thing. This is a real process when you're shooting with a thumb ring. So the artist, even though he is a bit liberal, I mean, the quiver is rubbed out. The other quiver isn't. But the arrows have been partially erased, whereas in the other quiver on the horseman behind him, they're quite clear.
Yeah, that's
so clear. I mean, you know, this is you get something a few hundred years old that's gone through very many hands.
Yes.
Things happen. Maybe your child thought, I don't like it.
Yes.
You don't know.
Just one point, the descriptions of these miniatures, they're all in this Persian archery and swordsmanship, if people are interested, because we don't want to talk about miniatures per se. Okay, this is Rostam and Esfandiar. This is clear that he shoots him with the two-pronged arrowhead, as you know. And
Yeah.
look at this.
Oh,
Look at the
really-
quiver here
Mhm.
and here.
Yeah. So this is Kaja.
Yeah, that's Qajar, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Several things give it away. Rustam looks very much like Fath Ali Shah Qajar. The turned up toes on the boots are a bit extreme. I mean, there's quite a few Persian paintings. None of them showed turned up toes until the Qajar period. So it was a fashion thing. But on the other hand, if you look closely, you notice a number of very real things. The leg armor is based on real leg armor.
Yes, real one.
The quiver is simplified. It's completely simplified. But if you look at the arrows in his unfortunate opponent, you'll see that painting structure is very similar to the arrows in the museum.
Yes.
So they're painted on that part up to the nock, the feathers cover part of that. It's the same on the Rustam cum Fath Ali Shah figure. It's interesting. I'm just looking at that. He's wearing bazuband, but they're the ones that just cover the outside of the arm. They don't have an inside protection. Yes. Like the previous painting, notice that he's shot. He's not doing anything with his bow. He's not doing anything with his bow. There's no, as the Arabs would call it, khatra.
No.
Because I mean, yeah, again, it's a painting. It's not a photograph. It's probably only representing what the painter thought was appropriate. But it also shows that kind of concentration when you shoot.
Mm.
And I mean, his hand is further back because it's later in the shot, because his poor opponent is trying to pull the arrow out. So, you know, that's a bit later. He's riding a gelding, I would guess, because riding a stallion was not a good plan at that time. The wonderful mustaches. This is kind of a hangover from the late Safavid period. Long mustaches were a real thing in the late Safavid period. From Shah Abbas onwards, it was just everybody liked it.
Pete, please take a look at the eye of this horse. He looks like, oh, come on, guys, starts again. Really?
Remember that discussion we had before, that the horses in Persian miniatures, everyone has a personality.
Yes.
And often the horses are kind of like the horse of the man behind Rustam.
Yeah.
His horse is looking up going, oh my God, what's happening?
Exactly. Yeah, the same thing. Looking up, oh God, yeah.
Yeah. And notice also the spotted pattern of the horse.
Yeah.
It's possibly representing a real horse. A friend of mine owned a horse that was white with little black spots all over it. It was a very weird horse. But they're not kind of trying to be very photographically accurate. There's two spotted horses in this. There's the person that's behind the wounded man has a spotted horse too, but a different color combination. But what they're saying is, we know about spotted horses. And they're not saying this is what a spotted horse looks like, but they're just indicating they know about these things.
Yes.
That's the other thing. If you notice the arrow in the man's face, if you look at the nock, it's very flared. This is not attempting to show you what knocks look like. It's just there's a nock here. Notice, not to say they made knocks that stuck out like that. And we've just been looking at real arrows. All the knocks have straight slots. There's no weirdness in them at all.
Let me just make it smaller. So I want you to take a look at that, please. Just a second, please. Because I think this one is also very good, because they always Rostam Esfandiar, different interpretations, but will reveal us some interesting. Unfortunately, I don't have more of that, but okay, then we can also share it. It does, oh, sorry. I just didn't do it correctly. Just a second, please. Okay. So where is this? Just a second, please. Okay.
Oh, poor old
Okay, here.
Isbandi. He's
Yes.
getting punched again.
Yes.
The
Look
thing
at
that's
this.
Yeah.
Gabe,
That
take a
was
look at that. Look at the quiver here and the other one.
quiver proportions and the bowcase proportions are a little bit closer to reality. They're not quite. They're not at the level of, say, a early Safavid painting where you
Yes.
could. You can actually take the painting and turn it into a
Yes.
real quiver. And then compare that quiver to a quiver in a museum and say, oh, right, that's exactly.
The bowcase shape is almost the same as the one you made for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's important to understand that the artists are simplifying these things. So the early, like the painting I used as a template for your bowcase, the artist was trying to be really precise. In this, it's like we're in the equivalent of the Impressionist period of European art. They're trying to get the feeling. You look at the eyes of Rustam.
Yeah.
There's a intensity there. We can't look at the eyes of the other guy because they're gone. But actually the horses look more angry in this one.
Exactly. I look at the Raksh, Rostam's horse, really angry. Look at this.
So again, this is we look at this as, miniature paintings and think, it's a bit quaint or something, but they're not. The people painting these had an agenda that they were trying to carry across.
Absolutely.
And for people like us that are interested in weapons and techniques and that, we can see things that are useful. But
look, please take a look at that. He's not holding his bow after the shot in line, but he's like putting it down. Do you see that, like a khatra? You see that?
This is actually a preparation for getting the next arrow. So you shoot, you bring the bow down across your horse, you draw your next arrow, you nock it. Now, it's impossible to tell, but if his horse is closer to us than Isfandiar's horse, then if he knocks an arrow down there, a person over here cannot see him doing it, and then he can bring it up and shoot it straight away. There's a Safavid painting of King Dara and the herdsman, where King Dara rides along and he comes upon a group of herdsmen with the horses, and the point of the story is he doesn't recognize them as his own employees, which I've seen a few CEOs do, and he starts to draw his bow out of sight, because when the bow, this is not the full position. This is we're there and we bring it down and then we turn it around, like we rotate it so the upper limb is down, then we nock an arrow, and then we can bring the whole thing over and shoot before anybody knows we've got an arrow on the bow. I've only seen this in miniature paintings, but one of the texts, one of the Kipchak texts that have been translated by Professor Ostopchul, which is based on a much earlier text from the Abbasid period, talks about all the tricky things horsemen did to confuse their enemy. This is with lances and swords and bows and all kinds of things. It's not unusual to see strange things like this. The fact that he's still got his hand up. Now, if the bow is here, sorry, I'm doing this the wrong hand.
I just want to say you're left-handed now.
I'm looking at the image, which is a mirror image, so it reverses everything for me. So he's just shot, right? So he's shot, the hand goes up, the bow comes across and down, then he reaches back into his quiver, takes an arrow out, and knocks it on the bow. He has to twist that arm like that, knocks it on the bow, and then brings it up and shoots. Now, it's not a hard technique to use, but it's a very hard technique to observe if you are on in English, you say near side for the side of the horse you mount from. So that's usually the left side. So if you're on the near side of a horseman who does that, you will not see him knock the arrow.
Yes.
And this is the whole point. When you're facing somebody like this, your right arm and shoulder are out of view. So you can pull an arrow out and you can knock it, and then you can bring it up and shoot it.
Yes.
Now, the thing is, this is true in hunting too. So if you are telegraphing to the animal you're hunting that you're pulling an arrow out, or you're taking it off a bow quiver or something like that, and you're doing all this stuff, then the animal thinks something's happening. But if this all happens out of sight,
yes,
and the only time the arrow knows something, the animal knows that an arrow is coming, is when you actually raise up to shoot.
yes.
It's quite deceptive. And people obviously are just as easy to trick as animals.
And the same thing again, Rostam against Esfandiar, different interpretations.
Yeah.
And look at this. And this time Rostam decided to shoot not a two-pronged arrow, but to shoot a simple arrow into Esfandiar's eye.
Well, but I think it's important to recognize the fact that this is a literary trope, but people regularly were shot in the face.
Yes.
I mean, this was a serious thing. You would aim at somebody's face.
Yes.
It's interesting to me that Rustam's leopard skin helmet cover has horns.
Yes, that's right. The reason was that he in Shahnameh shot it, just for our viewers who don't know Shahnameh, because Esfandiar was invincible, and Rostam found out that there is no way he could do any harm to Esfandiar. Then it was told by Seymour that he could shoot in the eye and he's going to die. That's the only place where he's not invincible.
It's like Achilles' heel. This is
exactly
Esfandiar's weak spot. And
yes.
Well, you know, the incredibly complex relationship of Persian literature with previous historical things. Bear in mind that the Rustam cycle is probably from Khorasan or even Sakistan. This is really interesting. The way
in Shahnameh it says Rostam is from Sistan, as you know that.
Yeah, which is Sistan is the contraction of Sakistan. The land of
Khorasan is here, right? Sistan down there. So we'll be in southeast of Iran.
Yeah.
Zabul. He comes from Zabul.
Yeah, Zabul, yeah. So and there is a theory that this cycle of stories is an independent Zabuli type cycle that was incorporated into Iranian literature. It's so complicated to go into that, which we won't do.
I mean, Shahnameh in Persian is a masterpiece of Iranian literature. This is something which has tremendously shaped the whole region, not only Iran proper, but everyone else. Absolutely.
Yeah, for a country that is so in love with poetry, to have a national epic that is like this is incredible.
Yes.
But again, Shahnameh is it's a literary production, but it has a lot of historical relevance. And from the time it was, I'm going to say published, when Ferdowsi gave it to Mahmud of Ghazni, it's had a deep effect on the various dynasties that ruled in Iran, in Afghanistan, in northern India, in Central Asia.
I mean, it's about, as you know, it's about ancient Iran, Sasanian kings, Kianid kings, and Ferdowsi, as all scholars also agree on that, Ferdowsi revived Persian spirit. For us, Shahnameh is the most important book for everyone in Iran, for scholars, for everyone. Yeah, absolutely.
From an outsider's point of view, it's like the heart of Iranian culture.
Absolutely. Is the heart. And here Rostam decided not to wear heavy armor. Rostam decided to go light. Right? So very interesting.
His quiver is a little bit more realistic, but notice how compacted it is. It's much shorter than a real quiver. The arrows are much shorter.
Yes.
Because obviously he's drawing back here, so his arrows are going to be this long.
Yes.
So maybe 75 centimeters, 80 centimeters long.
Please take a look at that. Esfandiar is having a shamshir, which is clear. but
Yeah.
his khanja is bejeweled, but not his
Ah.
shamshir.
Well, I mean, that might not be uncommon because shamshirs, there was an aesthetic for shamshirs. And I mean, in say Turkey and up into Russia, lots of jewels on swords is fine, but in Iran, no, it doesn't seem
No.
to be. Though, to be honest, there's a sword in St. Petersburg in the Hermitage that was a gift from Fath Ali Shah. The
Yes.
blade is Safavid, but the mountings are Qajar, and it's covered in rubies and diamonds. The scabbard, the hilt
Yeah.
though looks
Yeah.
just like a regular shamshir, and the
It,
blade is beautiful.
the central bank of Iran has a collection. Unfortunately, I have been trying to get access to it. It's extremely hard, and they have also lots of arms and armor. All of them, all of them are bejeweled. All of
Mm.
them. For example, on one side of the scabbard, they have like one of them has 140 diamonds, flawless diamonds. On the back, rubies. I mean, they are just. I mean,
Well,
these in the central bank of Iran.
well, in Qajar times, it wasn't uncommon to have the front of the scabbard covered in jewels and the back covered in
Yes.
enamel with
You know, if
paintings.
you go to Iran, you should definitely go there because they don't allow. So I have been trying for over 15 years to gain access, hopefully one day. And these
Mhm.
are flawless, best Persian blades you can see. And then, of
Yeah.
course, the scabbards and many other things. Anyhow, let's go to the next one. Again, the same thing. We keep seeing the same scene all the time. And look at this. We had this
That's
scene
much
before.
earlier though.
Yes. And this time Rostam decided to have his armor back. And look at this.
This
Yeah.
is first of all a much earlier painting.
Yeah.
It looks is this Shirazi, something like that?
Yeah.
I would say what, 1400s,
Yeah.
1440, something like that,
Older,
1430.
much older miniature. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, again, there's a very faint trace of the thumb ring. If you look
You're
really
right.
carefully, you can just see it's just like a
Yeah.
little line
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
but the correct way round.
Yeah, correct.
His quiver has a facility for putting arrows on the outside face,
Yeah.
separate. These are the arrows that you would have a special heads or something, so that these are the ones
Here
you're
you
using
mean?
at close
Here?
range or long range or whatever. Yeah,
Here beat? Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, that's exactly right. Um, in this period, you notice the bow is kind of fairly structured, but it's very, very short. Um, I think that's more artistic than anything else at that period. The bows were probably, I don't know, 1.2 meters to 1.4 meters long in Iran. This was the preferred length. But there's important things here. Fully armored horses.
Fully.
You notice the little crisscross tassels along the bottom of the armor.
Yeah.
That's fairly common.
That's
The way of depicting the whole scene is very common. I'm trying to look. You can't tell whether the horses. Oh, maybe there's not much trace to say whether the horses are wearing horseshoes. In Iran, horseshoes were not horseshoe shaped. They were shaped almost like a heart or a rounded thing with a little peak in it. It's a flat plate. And if it's a horse, there are 3 nails each side. And if it's a mule or a donkey, there's only 2 nails. So you can actually look at the feet of the horse. And if there are nails shown, you can tell whether it's a horse or a donkey, even if you can't tell look at the horse. And the thing is, artists must have done this as routine. They didn't go and look at every horse and check to see how the horseshoes are put on. And the same thing is when you look at the quiver,
yeah.
I think originally this was fairly highly decorated in the painting, which
Yeah.
is the real quivers were highly decorated as well.
Yes.
You notice, and I think you might have noticed in all the paintings, when you're on horseback, your quiver is sitting at roughly 45 degrees.
Yes. 45.
And the reason is that the safest position, when it's at 45 degrees, the arrow's not going to fall out, but it's really easy to get back and pull an arrow out. The colors in the arrows are different. Like Isfandiar's arrows have a pinkish, ochreish color, whereas Rustam's arrows are pure white. Now that may have some kind of symbolic purpose to it, but on the other hand, it might have been just because the artist felt like it. He might have thought yellow armor, reddish arrows, red armor, whitish arrows. It might have been an artistic decision rather than
Yes.
a practical one.
Mm.
It's important to notice too, the armor doesn't cover the horse's legs because
Mm.
otherwise it would be just too hard for the horses to move
But
around.
still, you can look at this horse eye. Oh
Yeah.
God, really? Again, it's not very
What are we doing
fascinating.
here?
Too heavy,
I
right?
love the horses. I do.
And you say, oh,
there's
really? Again? You see that?
yeah.
That's it.
And it's done. Even the armor has been shaped to
Yes.
make it look that way.
Talking about horses, now before we start about quiver or bow case, look at the face of this horse.
Yeah, it's going, oh my God.
Exactly.
It's absolutely brilliant.
Fascinating.
And
yeah.
I mean, the archer is very calm. I've just shot a dragon or a griffin or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The horse is going, what? Why are we here?
Exactly. The horse is completely scared.
Yeah.
Very funny.
I'm sure back when these were painted, that the people that bought these books or paid for the paintings to be done would appreciate that.
Yes.
I think they would really get the humor in that. It's not an accident because it's been going on too long.
Yes.
It's hundreds of years these horses all have personalities.
Yes.
And I mean, it's funny. It's the same in Indian painting and it's the same in Chinese paintings. The horses always have more personality than the people.
Exactly. And take a look at that. Also beautiful, right? Look at what he has.
Yeah. Now this is the real bow case that they're alluding to. They're not depicting it. They're just alluding to it. Would have been probably lacquered in gold with black decoration. This stands out really brilliantly. So you get a piece of leather, you paint it with a ground of gold, and then you do your detail in arabesques. And I use that term very loosely. There's specific terms in Persian painting, Turkish painting, and whatever for the types of these patterns. They're not just one generic thing, that they have specific times. There's, particularly in Persian painting, there's a concentration on vegetal designs, but it's very common in Turkish stuff too. And you see it. This is very simplified, but sometimes you see it on saddles too. You see it on a lot of everyday things that a person would be using, for his military life, if he was a soldier or if he was a prince, for visiting his various mansions or whatever. The level of decoration is exquisite.
Exquisite, really exquisite.
Yeah.
So the next one is also an earlier miniature. Again, we go back, and
this looks late Safavid, like about after Shah Abbas or around Shah Abbas's time. Oh, this is one of the ones where the armor has little holes in the armor to put your foot through to get to the stirrup. That's what those little rectangles are.
Yeah.
Not all horse armors were like that, but they did make them, and they do show up in paintings. I don't know if there's any surviving ones like that. I mean, you look at that horse armor, the hero on the left, that kind of plate and mail horse armor. There's quite a bit of it surviving. It's often, old stuff is often labeled as Mamluk.
Yes.
But this was booty taken. The ones that are in Western collections is generally booty taken by the Ottomans, and it could have been either Mamluk or Safavid.
Exactly.
So after
they always say Mamluk, but I always think that you need to look. Maybe there is an inscription. Maybe there is something else. I agree with you. They always say that too. Beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the real reason is because this type of armor was general through that whole area.
Yeah,
And
it was.
if you've got a stamp on it saying this belongs to, Sultan Hussein Bey or whatever, and he's a famous Mamluk Emir, doesn't mean it was made for him. It just means he owned it. And there's so much work that goes into one of these.
This
If you
is
see,
one of rare miniatures showing this type of horse armor.
oh yeah, it's not that common. The other thing is, I'm noticing the decoration on the boots because I'm a leather worker, and this really stands out to me.
Mhm.
Notice the kind of quite elaborate decoration on the upper part of the boot.
Yeah.
Now the
This one
man
you
who,
mean? This one you mean?
yeah, and it's the same on his enemy.
Oh yeah, that's right. The
Yeah,
enemy has the same.
yeah. Whereas the people in the background don't. Now, his enemy's feet are out of his stirrups, and you can see he's got high heels, which is very common in Iran.
I need to say
And up
something
into
about the enemy. He seems to be a Taekwondo champion. Look at the
Oh yeah,
look at
well,
the flexibility.
he's falling off his horse. I like the
Yes.
fact that his quiver is basically float. He's falling. The quiver is just floating along behind him by its straps. He's
Does
been
he
shot.
does he have an arrow in his face? Look at this.
I don't know. I think that's the bowstring.
Ah, that's no, that's a bowstring. It's not an arrow.
Yeah,
You're
but
right.
he's definitely got an arrow that's gone up here, which would be
Oh, I
very nice.
saw the arrow. Sorry, I was looking for the arrow. That's the arrow.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the arrow. Yeah, right. You're right.
that's done him in. He's wearing like big shalvar over his coat, which is still common among Kurds, where you get these really big trousers. You wear a long coat and shirt and whatever, and you put the trousers over the whole thing, and they protect it from dirt and dust and whatever.
I'm going to say something. Do you want to see horse expression on a human being? Look at this guy. Look at him.
Yeah, he's not happy. He
No,
knows.
oh God.
It's a funny thing. In the lower left-hand corner, someone's doing this, and it means, I mean, in the context of Persian painting, it means and he's biting his fingertip or something like that. So the guy in the bottom left is shot. The guy that's just been shot is going, oh no, and the guy who shot him is that's very good. He's totally calm.
Yeah. And he has a very nice quiver as well, right?
Yeah. They both have fairly good quivers. They're of a particular style. They have a two support cusps, a smoothing, a rounded bottom, and a straight back edge. This is quivers of this type have survived in Turkish and European collections. I'd love to find some in Iranian collections, because they would have been ones made there. There's a lot of things you see outside of Iran and you say, well, that's really an Iranian design. That's very Persian looking, but you don't know where it's made. I mean, we know in Russia that sometimes quivers were exported to Russia from Iran and Turkey, and then in Russia they took them apart and embroidered them and then put them back together. So you would have perfectly Russian things, but the actual background pieces of leather were made in Tehran or in Istanbul or something like that. Oh,
Please take a look at the quiver here.
Yeah,
beautiful, right?
Yeah, it's a lovely setup. He also has, noticed his leg armor is iron and then gilded iron and then iron and gilded iron in stripes.
Yes.
It's amazing to me that almost always in Persian miniatures, they go to the trouble of showing all the little straps that hold that leg armor on.
Yeah, here as well.
The next thing that's very interesting from an archery point of view is look at the grip on the bow that the man who's just shot has.
Yeah,
his
here.
index finger is retracted on the back of the bow. His thumb is down.
Ah, right.
This is a form of Changali bus. It's not extreme, but this is a common way to shoot. This is almost like the Kabzi Bahram. So the person that painted this knew enough about archery to know about grips, whereas everybody else just shows a hand holding the bow, right?
Yes.
But he is
And look
showing.
at this. This is what I call a coffee table talk after being shot. You know?
Yeah. Do you know a good doctor? Well, my uncle's a surgeon. He lives in the village down the road.
And in Karbala Hilt, as we say, Karavel, or we say in Persian,
Yeah,
Karbala Hilt.
yeah.
Beautiful. Really beautiful. I love this painting.
Yeah, it's got lots of detail. And the other thing is, I'm not sure. I've never been able to know this for sure. I know that some boots were made with separate shoes with the high heel separate, so you could kick them off when you went into a house, and you didn't have to take your boots off. And the surviving ones from Bukhara, they've been published. They're really beautiful. So often when I see this, I don't know whether it's a boot with the lower part in a different color, or it's somebody wearing soft soled boot with a shoe over it, which is historically known. You're right about the Carabella hilts. If you notice that the pommels of the saddles have those two ears facing forward, that type of saddle often in Safavid paintings is shown in use by Uzbeks and Turanians in general.
Yes, and look
There's
at this
quite a
here.
few of them.
Look at
Yeah.
this
Oh
early
yeah, like
Char Ayna.
yeah. This has got a lot of detail in it that you wouldn't expect. His
Yeah.
basal band had been separated into like a wrist part and a arm part,
Yeah.
but that wrist part would have gone halfway down the arm.
Yeah.
But, look, to get this much detail, I mean, when you look at something like the Great Shahnameh of Shah Tahmasp or something, it's got even more stuff in it. But this is good. You can see also they're using curb bits. They're probably ring bits. That bit there is the shanks of the bit. That suggests mainstream army people. Whereas say tribal levies would have snaffle bits with the rings on the side, because that's what the tribal nomads. But in the southwest of Iran, even the tribal people use bits like that. Certainly into the mid 20th century, because they were collected by Danish anthropologists. But and also the shabrak, the cloth under the saddle, that thing that covers the kidneys of the horse and keeps them warm. Very common in Iran, a very common thing.
Very common. And now again back to Rostam. Now Rostam decided to get in a kneeling position and shoot.
Oh, he's still angry, is he? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's classic. That's classic.
Yeah.
The problem I have with that is that he is shooting left-handed at somebody on his right-hand side. So the artist has got a bit confused, but because the hand that he's released with is on the same side that his bow case is. The hand that he's holding the bow is on the same side as his quiver. So either he swapped hands, which people did, or the artist just didn't care. He's wearing his dagger in the front, even though it's a khanjar style dagger. He's wearing it like a peshkabs in the front.
Exactly.
But that again might be the artist just wanted to show his dagger, so he's moved.
Yes, he's wearing it where peshkabs is worn. You're right.
Yeah. And the design on the quiver of the poor dying person, even the design on the bow case, see, it's those interlock spirals. This was very common in Gilan in the late 1400s, and there's a Shahnameh. I think a lot of the paintings are in the David collection in Copenhagen, called the Big Head Shahnameh, because all the characters have big heads and they all have very good teeth. They're always smiling no matter what's going on. But their bow cases and quivers are beautifully designed. It's almost like calligraphy, except it's just plants, little leaves.
Really beautiful.
This is a direct relation to that, even though this is hundreds of years later.
Okay, the next one is a bit brutal, but it's a painting. our subscribers, but I actually has nothing to do with equipment so much. But I just said I'm going to put it here because for beat for you, right? Because
Okay.
some the very rarely Persian miniatures show that like Tameshigiri and for Japanese where they used, what they used, corpses. So they to test human corpses back then. Okay, I warn again our subscribers, please. My apologies for this. But now in Persian miniatures, they show. Look at how many arrows are shot at these four
Oh,
guys.
wait a minute. It hasn't come up yet. Oh, that's very unfortunate.
I have never seen any miniatures with a guy he looks like a hedgehog.
Well,
Look at that.
in,
Or
in
like a,
Western art,
yeah.
in Western art, this is a common way to depict Saint Sebastian, who was shot to death with
Yeah,
arrows.
right. That's it.
So,
Yeah.
and bear in mind when this is painting, they knew about Western art, so that wouldn't be a shock.
But
But
look at his face, Pete. Look at the face of him. Oh, look.
yeah, got a bit of indigestion. The thing is that shooting somebody to death is recorded in history in Iran, where somebody was so hated by his enemies that everybody wanted to shoot an arrow into him, and this happened. I think certainly in the Safavid times there's a mention of it. This yeah, he looks unhappy. The two horses are looking at each other saying, "Oh, you're rather good looking." They're totally ignoring what's going on. There's a couple of heads down there. Somebody's
Yeah.
arm was lopped off.
Yeah.
Things weren't going well.
No, not at all.
And
Not at all.
his bow case is covered in pearls with a few
Yeah.
bits of ruby and things just to show off how wealthy he was.
Yeah, imagine you show off all your wealth, you're dressed so very well, and you're shot like 100 arrows at you. God,
Yeah.
look at that.
Yeah, and his quiver's turned around at the back. You notice the arrows are facing forward. It's got twisted round by all the impacts and everything.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Ah, yes.
And again, you see that? This is also something interesting.
Notice this is well, it's unfortunate for the poor person in the foreground who got his head split open.
Yes.
But the archer, it's important. This is something that you might not have noticed. In some of the paintings, the bow arm is on the left-hand side of the horse's neck, so it's partially covered, and sometimes it's on the right-hand side of the horse's neck. This isn't accidental because you shot both ways. It was really important that you could shoot on the right-hand side. Now, you can't shoot very far to the right unless you change hands or use jamaki, but this is quite commonly shown shooting down and to the right.
Yes.
And I think this was, you had to be flexible enough in the waist to be able to turn all the way, because you can stand up in your saddle and you can twist, but you don't get full flexibility unless you can completely turn at the waist. And he seems totally calm. His horse is looking back at him saying, "What?" But
okay, this one actually wanted to show target here archery on a human being. Brutal, really brutal. Possibly a prisoner.
Yeah, this would be somebody. Again, maybe this would be a thing you would think about for rebels. Somebody who'd been entrusted in a position of power and then rebels against the central government. They like to do very nasty things to them. Now, if this was Eastern Europe, that post, he wouldn't be tied to it. It would be inserted into his body.
Oh, God.
Impaling was very, you've heard of Vlad Dracul. Impaling was very popular in Eastern Europe.
I mean, come on, they're at least nice to him. He's sitting on it. Let's look at it in a positive way.
Apparently, it was a horrible way to die, but it wasn't as painful at first as.
Yes,
exactly. I don't know why I even brought that up. That's horrible.
Yeah.
But everybody, the people shooting him, see, it's like they're at the fair, and it's Popinjay shooting. We're shooting at a target on a pole, and there's no enmity. on their faces. They're just very happy we get to shoot. It's a bit weird. A lot of them kneeling, and
Yes.
they're kneeling with their right knee on the ground, which I think is mentioned in one of the manuscripts we
Yes.
translated.
Yeah.
And shooting up, I mean, you can see the bowstrings have been just roughly drawn in. There's no attempt to make it
And
look
one is
real.
running. Look at this, running and shooting. One of them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a YouTube channel where the proprietor would be very happy about that. The other thing to note is shooting up high, they're drawing down to here. They're not rocking all the way back. This is the kind of lazy way of doing it, but it still works. Yeah, I think everybody is wearing a helmet and male aventail, but
yeah. And the next one is also interesting. Again, armpit shot.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you don't really want to raise your arm.
And do you see that?
You notice?
The same color of that Zand quiver we saw.
Yeah, but also look, the man that shot in the armpit is actually fighting left-handed, even though his quiver is on the right-hand side. So he's holding his shield with his right hand and his sword with his left hand, and he gets shot in the armpit. I don't know whether there's anything in the text about that, but to me that's pretty strange. Look, again, it could be just the artist reversed a picture.
Yeah.
So he's got a series of sketches on, usually done on transparent vellum.
Yeah.
You trace them out, and you put little holes around the outlines, and then you have a thing called a Ponce pouch, which is a cloth bag with charcoal in it. You put it down where you want the figure, you tap it, and then it leaves an outline, and then you draw the figure. But the thing is, of course, if you want the person coming from the left and you've only got one coming from the right, you can just turn it over.
Yes.
And then you get these left-right things. This is what photographers occasionally do. Well, not the photographers, publishers do when they're publishing a book and they want the figure to be coming from the right. They just turn the photograph upside down. Oh, I mean, right to left. This one is much more technically interesting. Yes. Again, the man on the armored horse has that little hole to put his foot through to the stirrup.
Yeah.
The bowman, his stance is more believable. It's more anatomically correct. The quiver is more reasonable in size. The bazuband are what real bazuband look like, so that they've got half the inside covered. He's riding heel down, which is I think fairly common in Iran. And the man he's shooting against, notice he's got his shield up to defend his body and his face, and he's drawing his sword pretty much undercover. It would be hard to see that he was doing that. There's a lot of technical stuff in this that's quite believable.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. I don't even know why I put it here. Oh yeah, of course there is a quiver. I was looking for a quiver. Yeah, that's right. That's a quiver.
This is Rustam and the White Div, is it?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, that's very famous. Again, like the quiver shows signs of those later quivers. Notice that on the leading edge, it's a smooth curve, then two little cusps. And the top cusp, it's probably open like those quivers we were looking at earlier. So that the artist was familiar with those, but he was also familiar with the older paintings, and he's combined the two things together. Not to say you couldn't make a quiver exactly like that, but the other thing that shows the age of this is his sword is hanging edge backwards, which is late Safavid and onwards.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really quite interesting. Poor old White Div, he always gets his head cut off. Oh, he's doing that with as well.
Now look at this one. Excuse me, I put them here. I mean, it's not related specifically, but it's, I think, I found a couple of miniatures, which you can see also in this Persian archery and swordsmanship, but they execution by archery, by bow, right?
Yeah,
Very
some
beautiful.
upside down, some right side up. There's something almost Japanese about the guy whose arms are tied behind his back. You know how the Japanese have all these different ways of tying people up
Yeah,
to
yeah,
restrain them. The prince is riding across from the right and watching all these archers shoot. It's interesting to note that the prince has a bow case and presumably a quiver. The people on foot aren't carrying quivers. They're not wearing quivers because
no,
quite often on foot you just carry a bundle of arrows. A quiver was particularly the sign of a horseman.
yeah. Oh, we talked about it already. This we had. This as well. And why are they just being repeated again? I don't even understand. Mhm.
Yeah, that's another.
Yeah,
It's gone
talked
into.
about it. Okay, now that's it. Okay, so so this was a very interesting, aren't they? They were really interesting
Yeah,
miniatures and artifacts.
it's interesting also to see how many traces of what people were really doing ended up in paintings that weren't trying to be that realistic, but
Yeah.
it was just in the psyche of the painters. They saw these things. The first thing they drew was something vaguely like a real thing. I mean,
Yes.
the Safavid, like the early Safavid period, when there was a lot of money available for for artists, uh, they were much more precise.
Yes.
And as I said, I've actually made quivers based. Well, I've got two behind me. This
Mm,
is based on an actual Safavid painting.
mm.
The first one, the one.
Can you
Let me see.
show us, please, what you made,
Yeah,
please?
I'll
This
take
will
them
be
off here.
our third part of our
Yeah,
discussion.
so I'll hopefully I can do this without tripping.
So because we wanted to show antique pieces and then miniatures and then what Beat has made.
Okay, so this is a quiver based
Mhm,
directly on the proportions of a quiver in a miniature. So
mhm.
that's exactly the proportions measured
Beautiful.
off the miniature.
Mhm.
It's quite wide.
Yes.
Um, but it's still totally practical. Now, the belt on this quiver, uh, if you look at enough miniatures, you will notice a lot of the belts are white and they don't have buckles or anything. This has just got a loop, and
Yes,
the
true.
belt goes around you twice and you tie the loop off.
True.
It's really practical. And the leather straps don't have buckles either. They just have slits in them.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of quiver belts are shown that way because a lot of the figures are ordinary soldiers. Sometimes rich people have a gold belt,
Mm,
and then you will see a white
mm,
belt underneath. This
mm,
one's made out of rope, and
mm.
bear in mind that making
Mm.
rope was a very common thing. But my feeling is that white may also mean rawhide. So they could have
Right.
been leather, but just rawhide strips.
Can
And
you
they
show
may have.
us the back of it, please?
Okay, so this is making it without the third strap at the back.
Oh, okay. I see.
And the other quiver has all those refinements. Now, the reason I did this was, first of all, I didn't have any evidence for the strap on the back, except for in the paintings, the quivers are always perfectly balanced at 45 degrees. And I had to make one to find out whether it would do that without anything else. Now, this is quite heavy and it's quite big, and
Big.
it does actually sit fairly well.
Mhm,
But this is not, I think, how they were made. Um, Back to the early
mhm,
mid 1500s, there are surviving quivers, and they have various fittings on the back to take another strap. So I think
mhm.
when quivers got this shape,
Yes.
they made them, as they got shorter, they had to put an extra strap to stop them tipping up like that. That's the big problem. So the way they did that was they I'll just put that down and get the other quiver,
Yeah.
which is the same quiver. It's from the same, it's the same painting, but
So,
with the second quiver, what I did was I contracted it to fit the sizes of surviving quivers. So that one is to me too wide, but it's exactly what the painting showed. But my guess is that they weren't that wide, and what they did was, as a quiver maker, to me the paintings are from the patterns of the quiver, and but the real quiver itself was a little bit more practical. Now this one has a belt based on. They also made leather belts. And what they usually did, sometimes the belt had a single buckle and sometimes it had two buckles. And why do you have two buckles? It's because it's to position the bow case.
Yeah.
So that you can exactly position the bow case. If the bow case is like this, which is what normal bow cases were like, they would slide up and down the belt.
Yeah,
but if there's a spot in the belt, then you have to have at least two buckles, or a belt hook and a buckle. Or what survived in some Turkish and Polish and Tatar quivers is you have two buckles at the back and a hook at the front. Now I'm going to undo the belt so that I can take the bow case off, because it's very hard to manipulate this with the belt on. Then I'll show you the back of the quiver, which will show you how I believe most of these quivers were made. And the later Safavid ones, you can see they've got lots of fittings on the back to keep the thing in a proper orientation. So this is the back of this quiver.
Beautiful.
And the strap that's threaded through the back is what stops the quiver tipping over like that.
Beautiful.
And this front strap here, when you mount a horse, that wraps around your thigh a bit, and it keeps the quiver at the correct angle when you're on horseback. This quiver I tested out to find out how many arrows you could comfortably carry in it. This is 24 arrows. It could take 30 without any trouble. It's not terribly complex to make. This front part of the quiver, I call this the outside pocket of the quiver. It's really useful for segregating your arrows. If the one I made for you had a special feature that you see in a few Persian quivers where they had little dividers. My feeling is that's what rich people had. But if you're going into battle, you want to be able to put as many arrows as you can in. But if you notice, the ones in the front gradually tilt that way. The ones in the back are straight up and down. So it's really easy to pick which arrow you want.
Yes, that's right.
These are really practical. It has a wooden base in it, so that no matter what kind of arrowhead you have, if you fall over, your arrowheads aren't going to come through the bottom of the quiver and stab you in the thigh, which is a very dangerous thing to happen. It's with a full load of arrows, it's not that heavy. This is quite thick leather. This is 3 to 4 millimeter leather. But you know, the whole thing, I think I made this about 2014, 15, around about that. The other one I made about 2012. Both of them are very practical quivers just for shooting. On horseback, this one sits better. The other one still works because it's quite heavy, so it will balance itself quite well. But I think that I think this size, I think, is much closer to what the real quivers were. The ones in museums, and I'm thinking there's a lot of Persian style quivers, not with this shape, but the general structure made in Turkey that have survived, and it's quite clear that this is roughly the size. If you look through the dimensions in Vienna Karlsruhe, in Kassel, in St. Petersburg, in the Hermitage. They're all roughly the same dimensions, between 45 to 47 centimeters, some 50 centimeters, but I think that depended on the size of the person. So this is, and you see, when you look at the miniatures, and particularly the early Safavid miniatures, this is based on a quiver from 1547, thereabouts. When you wear these, they just, because of the multiple straps, they just sit perfectly.
Yes.
And when you get on a horse, they just tip up a little bit so the arrows don't fall out. That's just how they work. You don't have to do anything special.
Can you show us the bow case as well, please?
Okay. The bow cases are simpler, but they're, and unfortunately this one, a bird did something nasty on it once. So the bow case, this type of bow case is just one piece of leather folded and stitched up.
Yes.
There are some you see that they're stitched along there too, because they're two pieces of leather, because obviously you could cut another piece that matched that shape and get more out of the leather. This actually takes a lot of leather to make. And the thing is, if you make them out of two pieces of leather, you can dye them different colors.
Yes.
Or you can cover the back in velvet or whatever. So this is the outside face of the quiver. That's just a simple end knot.
That's right.
My feeling originally when I made these, I made two pieces with a strap through the middle, and that makes the bow case sit flatter. But almost all the ones I've seen in museums have a single strap that goes through, and that just fits on the belt. Now, in general, Persian quivers, when worn, face backwards. Bow cases, particularly face backwards. I think that's the normal way they were made. And this, I intended to paint this, but I wasn't very good at painting until I made the second quiver, this one, because this bow case was made with that first bigger quiver. Until I made this one, I hadn't really perfected my painting skills quite that well. I'm not sure I've got a lot of improvement to do. Now, the thing about this is, when you put a bow in it, it really protects the bow. I mean, if you fall off a horse and your bow's in a bow case like this, this protect. I mean, it's only covering half the bow, but that's generally this is the half near your body. This is the half that's going to get crushed if you fall on it. The other bit of the bow that's sticking out, that's not a real problem. You don't have too many problems with that. And if you make this too big, it's an issue. But what I was saying before, the angle that this hangs on your belt is important for whether the bow gets in the way of the arrows in the quiver. In China, in the Manchu dynasty, also in the Ming, they wore the bow case so the bow faced forward. So the arrows and the bow never got tangled up. But on the other hand, when you're riding, the bow is, like sitting up in your way, whereas the Persian style facing backward, I think is more practical.
Yes. Is there any other quiver or bow case you want to share? These were just examples.
Well, I've got another one here. I could get and show you. It's a kind of cross between an Afsharid quiver, late Safavid quiver, and a Tibetan quiver, because until you published your book, no one had seen the back of a Afsharid Qajar quiver or late quiver like that. So nobody knew how they were fixed. But Tibetan quivers of the 18th and 19th centuries look almost identical. The difference is in the patterns. And so I had access to two original Tibetan quivers, and I could measure them and everything like that. And I did that, and I made one, but I made it look more Afsharid because that's what I was interested in. I'm not as good as the Tibetans were at painting leather. So if you give me a minute, you might want to cut this out. I'll go and get it for you. Sat on the belt. Okay.
Okay.
First of all, this is very much what an Afsharid quiver looked like, except the suspension isn't the same. Because as I say, until you published, I hadn't seen those quivers. As you can see, it's quite short as well. If you see Tibetan quivers, they're very much the same as this, except they have a lot more decoration, and they often have 2 slots for arrows to fit in outside. But what this is it has a wooden frame that runs all the way around, and the leather is nailed to the frame and also sewn together. There's stitching there. On the back, the Tibetan system was to have a triple ring at the bottom and a double ring at the top, and that was that strap that balanced the quiver. And usually, rather than having fittings that could be taken off and replaced, there was a metal fitting on the outside and a wait a minute, let me get this right. This is the inside, sorry. So there's a ring on the inside that the strap attaches to, which is then riveted through a metal fitting on the outside. So what's different that I now know, thanks to your book, is this part on a Persian quiver did not have any wood. The leather was brought together and just stitched through. So this is, you can see in the shape how similar it is to the I mean, you see there's paintings at Chihil Sultan with these cross straps and everything, but the cross straps were very popular. In India there's another system where the straps don't cross and they go around the back and go through a slot, and that strap is then the back support. But these quivers are really practical. The Tibetan ones often had woven strips of leather in there to keep the arrows apart. I've seen I've handled a couple that were like that. The ones of this shape often had like a strip of wood that separated it in halves, and then there was a little cross bit, so you had 4 segments in it. The other quiver I've got here is more in the Turkish style. This is about 40 years old. It's been on horseback. I've fallen off horses wearing it. The pouch is just for the thumb rings, but as you can see, it's only got like 2 cusps. Like, sorry, my house is full of arrows. I'm sorry. So it's got 2 cusps, like one there, whereas the Persian one has a double cusp in the middle. And this is but that doesn't mean that quivers like this weren't used in Iran. But I'm saying that the Safavid style was noticeable for those double cusps. The other thing is this outside pocket is shorter. Like in a Persian quiver, it would be going up to here somewhere, but in a Turkish quiver, it's right down the bottom. This means sometimes that it's quite fast to draw from. Now this one is made from a single piece of leather folded, but normally these were stitched up the back from 2 pieces of leather. And in fact, I've made ones like that, and they work perfectly well. There's no disadvantage to that. But the advantage of one that's folded is you can put blunt arrows in the back because it's bigger around the base. This one I made before I knew they had wooden bases, so I just sewed a thick piece of leather into the base, and it survived perfectly. If you want to make a quiver like that, it'll work perfectly well. And as I say, I used this last weekend, and I made it in the 1980s. So it's still perfectly functional. It's got its own bow case because I always make them in pairs. This is 3mm leather. It's stitched. I do hand stitching because I don't own a sewing machine that can sew leather. So there's 3 layers of leather there. In the Persian style quivers, again, stitching through 3 layers of leather. It's not terribly hard. Well, it's not easy, but it's not terribly hard. It's easy to plan these out. Now this one on the back, I'll get this organized properly. That is based on one of the quivers in Karlsruhe, which is Turkish. It's a very simple way of doing it. You have two pairs of slots in each support area, so you just have to punch holes through. Some of the ones I've seen have sewn on pieces of leather there, and the straps go through. That's so much easier to do. I only did this because it was an original style. If it was a matter of choice, I wouldn't do it that way. But you can see the size difference between the quivers is minimal. The Persian ones are slightly longer, but you know, we're talking that much longer. It's not like this or that. These are really functional quivers. If you want to, I'm not talking about fast shooting in the sense of Lars Anderson fast shooting, where he's got to a level that's almost superhuman. But in the type of shooting that people were using in battle, these quivers are very easy to draw from quickly. And I've been experimenting over the last couple of weeks. You can either draw in the traditional fashion, which is you grab the arrow here and pull it out, or put it back there to get it more balanced, or you can draw from the tip and pull it out that way. And what I found was when you had a quiver like this one, where you've got arrows in the front and in the back, the advantage is you can draw the ones in the front that way, and then you can pick the ones in the back that way, so that you don't have to think. So if the arrows in the back are meant for long distance and the arrows in the front are meant for short distance, then you can sort your arrows out quite simply. So for instance, you're on horseback, you're charging your enemy, you've got time for 3 shots before you've got to turn away and get away. If the ones at the back of the long distance ones, the first shot is from there, the next 2 shots are from the front. You've got, and so the heavier arrows you keep in the front, because they're the ones that are going to punch harder from close up. The lighter arrows that are better for flying long distances you put in the back. Because the other thing is, it's faster to get the ones from the front. So therefore, when you're further away from your enemies, it's better to take the ones out of the back. So that's, you know, we haven't found that in a manual yet, because they rarely talk about quivers. Arab archery does to some degree, and so does Mahdi Al-Atasusi. But the thing is that practical experimentation will show you whether something works or it doesn't.
Many thanks, Pete. It was lovely discussion as usual, very informative, and I wish you a nice day, and thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.